The morning sky over New Denver was clear blue when the first shadow appeared. Alan Frost was drinking his coffee on the balcony of his apartment when he noticed it, a dark spot growing larger against the perfect blue. At first, he thought it was a cloud, but clouds didn't move like that. More shadows appeared, spreading across the sky like ink drops in water. Alan's wristcom buzzed. The retired colonel still had connections to Earth Defense Command, and they were calling everyone back. "Frost here," he answered, his eyes never leaving the sky as the shadows took shape. Massive ships, unlike anything humans had built. "Colonel, report to headquarters immediately," came the terse command. "First contact protocol is in effect." Across the city at the Quantum Research Institute, Kate Monroe was deep in her work when the alarms began to blare. The physicist looked up from her equations, annoyed at the interruption. The institute ran drills often, but this alarm sounded different. More urgent. "Dr. Monroe," her assistant Ben called, rushing into the lab. "You need to see this." He activated the wall screen, and Kate's annoyance turned to stunned silence. The news was showing live footage of enormous ships positioning themselves above major cities worldwide. New Denver's ship was clearly visible, blocking out the sun. "Are they broadcasting anything?" Kate asked, her scientific mind already racing. "With questions?" "Nothing," Ben replied. "All attempts at communication have failed." In Washington, D.C., President Olivia Wright stood in the crisis room, surrounded by her top advisors. The atmosphere was tense as they watched the feeds from around the world. "Madam President, we need to decide on a response," said Defense Secretary Garcia. "These vessels have ignored all hails." "Keep trying," Wright ordered. "First contact is a delicate situation. We don't want to appear hostile." Her words were cut short by a flash of light on the screens. A beam of energy had shot down from the ship hovering over Cairo, striking the city center. Before anyone could react, more beams rained down on cities across the globe. "They're attacking without provocation," the secretary gasped. "This is an invasion." President Wright's face hardened. "Sound the evacuation alarms. Get our people to the shelters, and launch our defense satellites." The order came too late. The defense satellites were targeted first, destroyed before they could activate their weapons. The Kralaxian Empire had done its research. Alan was halfway to headquarters when the first beam hit New Denver. The blast threw his car off the road, flipping it twice before it crashed into a storefront. Dazed but alive, he pulled himself from the wreckage, military training kicking in despite his retirement. All around him, people ran in panic as more beams struck the city. Buildings crumbled, fires spread, and through the chaos, Alan saw the alien ship clearly for the first time. It was enormous, at least a mile long, with a design that suggested both beauty and terrible purpose. "Get to the underground," he shouted at the confused civilians around him. "Head for the bunkers." At the Research Institute, Kate and her team worked frantically to secure their research as the building shook from nearby impacts. "We can't leave this behind," Kate insisted, downloading their quantum resonance findings to a portable drive. "This could be important." The ceiling partially collapsed, sending dust and debris everywhere. Ben pulled Kate away from her workstation, just before a support beam crashed down where she had been standing. "The research won't matter if we're dead," he coughed through the dust. "We need to go now." They joined others heading for the Institute's underground bunker, designed to withstand earthquakes and other disasters. No one had imagined it would be used for an alien attack. As they descended, Kate looked at her tablet, which was still receiving data from the Institute's sensors. "These energy readings are off the charts," she mumbled, "but there's something strange about the frequency pattern." Halfway across the world, the Kralaxian commander Vorthal watched the assault from the bridge of his flagship. The primitive defenses of Earth were crumbling exactly as predicted. The beings of this planet had barely reached their nearest moon, making them easy prey for the Empire. "Resistance is minimal, Commander," reported his second-in-command. "Their military forces are scrambling, but our targeting systems are eliminating their command centers." "Excellent," Vorthal replied. "Proceed with the landing phase. Secure the primary resource zones." The resource zones were what interested the Empire most. Earth's incredibly diverse biosphere. The Kralaxians had surveyed thousands of planets, but none had the genetic variety of Earth. It was a treasure trove that would secure the Empire's future. By nightfall, major cities worldwide lay in ruins. The coordinated attack had disabled most organized resistance before it could begin. Military bases were destroyed, communications were disrupted, and governments were in chaos. In the bunker beneath what remained of the research institute, Kate worked by emergency lighting. The initial attack had knocked out power grids across the continent, but the bunker had its own generators. "Look at this," she told the other scientists who had made it to safety. "The energy weapons they're using operate on a quantum level, but there's a pattern here that suggests a vulnerability." No one paid much attention. They were too shocked, too concerned with contacting loved ones. But Kate kept working, driven by the scientists' need to understand. Miles away, Alan had gathered a group of survivors, including several military personnel like himself. They had made it to a small emergency command post built into the side of the mountains. "What's the situation?" Alan asked a young lieutenant who was trying to establish communications with other outposts. "Bad, sir," the lieutenant replied. "We've lost contact with most major commands. The aliens are landing troops now, starting with the coastal cities." "Any word from the president or joint chiefs?" "Nothing confirmed." Washington took heavy fire. Alan nodded grimly. "Then we need to assume command structure is compromised. We start organizing resistance immediately." The lieutenant looked uncertain. "Resistance against those ships with what?" Alan's expression was stone. "With whatever we have. We need to gather intelligence, find weaknesses, and strike back. Humanity doesn't roll over and die." In the presidential bunker, President Wright had survived along with some of her key staff. Reports were coming in slowly, painting a grim picture of worldwide devastation. "Madam President, we need to consider our options," said Secretary Garcia. "The Moon and Mars colonies haven't responded. We must assume they've been destroyed as well." Wright shook her head. "No, until we know for certain, we assume they're alive and possibly in better shape than we are. The lunar base was built to be self-sufficient and hidden." "What do we do now?" asked her chief of staff. "We fight back," Wright said simply. "We've been attacked without provocation. We will not surrender Earth." As dawn broke the next day, the scale of destruction became clear. The Kralaxian ships had positioned themselves above every major city, with smaller craft deploying troops to the ground. They were methodical, efficient, and completely ruthless. But what they didn't realize was that humanity had faced extinction before, from ice ages, plagues, and their own weapons. Each time, humans had adapted and survived. This would be no different. In his makeshift command center, Alan studied the limited intelligence they had gathered. "They're after something specific," he told his growing band of fighters. "They're not just destroying everything. They're securing certain areas." In her bunker, Kate had made a breakthrough. "The quantum signature of their weapons has a harmonic weakness," she explained to Ben, who was the only one still listening. "If we can generate a counter-frequency, we might be able to disrupt their systems." And in her bunker, President Wright drafted a message to be broadcast on all remaining frequencies. "People of Earth, we face the greatest threat in our history, but we will not be conquered. We will resist, we will survive, and we will prevail." The Kralaxians had attacked Earth. First, what they got was humanity's last stand, and humanity's last stand would become the Empire's worst nightmare. 6 months had passed since the day the sky fell. 6 months of fighting, hiding, and learning. The Kralaxians controlled most major cities now, but they did not control Earth. Not yet. Alan Frost looked over the map spread across the rough wooden table. It showed the western region of what was once the United States, now marked with red dots for alien strongholds and blue dots for resistance bases. "Too much red, not enough blue." "Report," he said to the woman who had just entered the mountain bunker. She was dirty and tired, having traveled for days to avoid detection. "The Denver camp has over 5,000 people now," Lisa Daniels said, removing her dust mask. "They've turned the old subway tunnels into living quarters." Lisa had been a data analyst for the government before the invasion. Now she was one of Alan's best scouts with a talent for getting into places unseen. "And the processing center?" Alan asked. Lisa's face darkened. "It's bigger than we thought. They're taking people in, but no one comes out, at least not as humans." The processing centers were perhaps the most terrifying part of the Kralaxian occupation. People were rounded up and taken to these facilities. Those who were later seen served the aliens like mindless drones. "We need to know what happens in there," Alan said. "Find me a way in." Lisa nodded. It was a dangerous assignment, but she understood the importance. "There's something else. The aliens seem especially interested in biological research centers and seed banks. They're collecting Earth's plants and animals." Alan made note of this information. Every piece of intelligence helped them understand their enemy. 200 miles away, Kate Monroe worked in a hidden lab built into an abandoned mine. The conditions were primitive compared to her old research institute, but she had made remarkable progress. "Try it now," she told her assistant Ben, who had survived with her. Ben activated the device they had built from salvaged alien technology and human ingenuity. A soft hum filled the room as lights flickered on the makeshift control panel. "Frequency is stable," he reported. "The quantum resonance is matching your calculations." Kate allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Now we need to test it on actual Kralaxian tech." Her breakthrough had come 2 months earlier. After studying the energy patterns from the alien weapons, she had discovered that their technology operated on quantum principles similar to her pre-war research. But there was a critical difference. Their systems were vulnerable to specific resonance frequencies. A tall man entered the lab, his presence commanding attention despite his civilian clothes. Jack Sullivan had once been CEO of the largest tech company in North America. Now he ran the Resistance's supply network. "I heard you need a piece of alien hardware," he said, placing a small device on the table. It was part of a Kralaxian communication system taken from a downed scout ship. Kate picked it up carefully. "How did you get this?" Jack's smile was grim. "Best you don't know. Let's just say we're getting better at fighting back." It was true. In recent weeks, the resistance had grown more effective. Small victories were adding up. A supply convoy disrupted here. A patrol ambushed there. Nothing major, but enough to give people hope. In orbit above Earth, Commander Vorthal was not pleased. He studied the reports from ground forces with growing frustration. "These humans are more resilient than expected," he told his officers. "They refuse to accept their defeat." "The subjugation process is continuing, Commander," his second-in-command assured him. "The processing centers are operating at full capacity." "Not quickly enough," Vorthal snapped. "The High Command expects results. The biological harvesting must be accelerated." What Vorthal didn't say, what only the highest-ranking Kralaxians knew, was that the Empire was desperate. Their home systems were dying, planets ravaged by their own technological advancement. Earth was not just another conquest. It was salvation. Its biodiversity held the key to reversing the ecological collapse threatening their civilization. Lisa, Daniel stood in line outside the Denver Processing Center, her heart pounding. She wore dirty clothes and kept her head down, just another desperate human seeking the food and shelter the Kralaxians offered inside. The disguise was perfect. She looked hungry because she was hungry. The resistance fighters lived on minimal rations. The line shuffled forward slowly. Ahead, she could see aliens scanning each person before allowing them to enter. They were tall beings, nearly 7 feet, with gray-blue skin and 4 arms. They wore what appeared to be both armor and life support systems. When her turn came, Lisa kept her eyes down as the scan washed over her. She had no weapons, nothing to trigger their security. The device hidden under her skin, allowing the resistance to track her, was made from human technology the aliens couldn't detect. "Proceed," the guard said in a mechanical voice. Their translation devices made them all sound the same. Inside, the processing center was clean and efficient. Humans were separated into groups. Some were given food and assigned sleeping quarters. Others were taken through different doors. Lisa noted everything, memorizing the layout as she was herded with a group toward the dining area. Over the next 3 days, she observed the patterns. Some people were selected for what the aliens called special duty and disappeared through a heavily guarded door. Lisa knew she needed to see what was behind it. On the 4th day, she got her chance when a minor power fluctuation caused brief confusion. She slipped away from her group and used the maintenance access she'd discovered earlier. The service corridors were monitored less heavily, and she made her way toward the restricted area. What she found would haunt her forever: humans in various stages of transformation. Some had implants visible on their bodies. Others were connected to machines that seemed to be altering them on a cellular level. All had vacant expressions, their humanity being stripped away. But it was the data screens that told the real story. Lisa's knowledge of data analysis helped her interpret what she was seeing. The Kralaxians weren't just controlling humans, they were studying Earth's unique biology. Human adaptability was something they desperately needed. After memorizing as much as she could, Lisa retreated, eventually making her escape during a shift change. It took her a week to return to Alan's base. "They're dying," she reported, her voice still shaking from what she'd seen. "Their entire species is dying from some kind of genetic degradation. They need Earth's biological diversity to save themselves." Alan absorbed this information thoughtfully. "So this isn't just conquest, it's desperation." "Yes," Lisa confirmed, "and there's something else. They're especially interested in human adaptability. How we can survive in so many environments, how we can overcome diseases." "That might explain why they're not just wiping us out," Alan said. While they were speaking, a communication came in. That changed everything. A scratchy voice over a secure channel using old military codes. "Rocky Mountain Base, this is Lunar Colony. Do you read?" The room fell silent. Everyone had assumed the Moon Colony was destroyed in the initial attack. "This is Colonel Frost. We read you, Lunar Colony." "Colonel, we've been monitoring. The Mars Colony is intact as well. We've been developing countermeasures. And we're not the only ones with good news." The transmission explained that both off-world colonies had survived by going dark immediately after the attack. The Kralaxians had bombed the visible structures, but missed the main underground facilities. For months, the colonists had been analyzing the aliens' technology, protected by their distance and the cover of supposedly destroyed bases. That same day, Kate's experiment succeeded. When exposed to her resonance device, the alien communication unit first malfunctioned, then completely shut down. "It works," she breathed, hardly believing it. "The frequency disrupts their quantum field." "Can it be weaponized?" asked Jack, who was observing the test. Kate nodded slowly. "If we can build a larger version, we might be able to disable their ships, even their personal equipment." "How long?" "With the right materials, a month, maybe less." Jack clapped his hands together, decisively. "You'll have whatever you need." The Resistance now had two critical advantages: knowledge of why the Kralaxians had come, and a potential weapon against their technology. For the first time since the invasion, there was real hope. That hope spread quickly through the hidden networks of survivors. Small victories became more common. A resistance cell in what was once Europe managed to capture a Kralaxian shuttle intact. Fighters in Asia destroyed a processing center, freeing hundreds of captives. And then came the biggest victory yet. Using Kate's technology, a joint operation between Alan's fighters and Jack's network successfully disabled and captured a Kralaxian scout ship. More importantly, they took their first live prisoner, a mid-level officer named Zexatoral. The alien was secured in a makeshift but effective cell. It regarded the humans with what seemed like a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Why did you attack us?" Alan asked through a basic translation device they had developed. The alien was silent for a long time before answering. "To survive." "By destroying our world?" Alan pressed. "By saving ours," Zextoral replied. "The Empire spans hundreds of worlds, but they are dying. The core worlds suffer ecological collapse. Earth is unique. Its life forms adapt, evolve, survive where they should not. The stars shone brightly over what remained of Seattle as Alan Frost watched the sky through binoculars. Somewhere up there, invisible to the naked eye, the Kralaxian reinforcement fleet was approaching. According to their calculations, it would arrive in less than a week. Are we ready? He asked without lowering the binoculars. Lisa Daniels stood beside him, tablet in hand, as ready as we can be. Jack reports that the power grid connections are complete. Kate and Paul have the device at the main site. Alan finally looked at her. In the year since they had been working together, Lisa had changed from a data analyst into a hardened resistance leader. They all had changed, and our forces, positioned around all major Kralaxian strongholds, she replied. If the plan works, we'll hit them while they're vulnerable. The plan was audacious. Kate's modified quantum field generator would create a massive stasis bubble around Earth, temporarily neutralizing all Kralaxian technology in orbit. While their ships were disabled, resistance forces worldwide would strike at ground installations. President Wright would then attempt to open communications with the Kralaxian High Command. It was a desperate gamble, but they had no choice. The approaching fleet carried enough firepower to end any hope of human victory. Across the continent at the main generator site, a hydroelectric dam that had been restored to partial function, Kate Monroe and Paul Evans made final adjustments. To their 1 year had passed since the day the Kralaxians darkened Earth's skies. 1 year of learning, adapting, and fighting back. What had begun as scattered resistance had grown into a coordinated global movement. Humanity was no longer just surviving. It was beginning to win. Alan Frost stood in the command center of what had once been a tourist lodge in the Rocky Mountains. Maps and screens covered the walls, showing troop movements and alien positions. Men and women moved with purpose, coordinating operations across what remained of North America. The raid on their supply depot was successful, reported Lisa Daniels, now Alan's intelligence chief. We captured 3 transport vehicles intact and destroyed the rest. Casualties? Alan asked, his face showing lines that hadn't been there. A year ago. 2 wounded, none killed, Lisa replied. The quantum disruptors worked perfectly. The quantum disruptors were Kate Monroe's creation, now produced in hidden factories across the globe. Small devices that generated the specific frequency that interfered with Kralaxian technology. Each raid yielded more alien equipment that could be studied and countered. What about the operation in New Denver? Lisa's expression turned serious. That's still on schedule for tonight. Jack has assembled the team. Alan nodded. Tell them I'll be joining personally. Lisa looked surprised. Sir, with respect, you're too valuable to risk on a field operation. This isn't up for debate, Alan said firmly. If we can capture their flagship, we get access to their entire command structure. This could change everything. The plan had been in development for months. Intelligence gathered by Lisa had revealed weaknesses in the security of the Kralaxian flagship that hovered above the ruins of New Denver. Jack Sullivan's network had smuggled disruptor technology and weapons to agents in the city. Now it was time to strike. Miles away in her expanded laboratory, Kate Monroe was working with Dr. Paul Evans, a biologist who had joined the resistance after escaping a processing center. Together, they were developing something far more powerful than the portable disruptors. The field generator is stable, Paul reported, checking the readings on their joint creation. If your calculations are correct, this should create a disruption bubble nearly a mile wide. Kate smiled tiredly. She rarely slept more than a few hours at a time. The field will disable any Kralaxian technology caught inside it. Their ships will drop from the sky. The device was massive compared to the handheld disruptors, requiring enormous power and complex components that Jack's network had scavenged or built from scratch. But if it worked, it would give humans the ability to create safe zones where the aliens' superior technology was useless. Any word from Alan's team? Kate asked. She and the colonel had become close over the past year, united by their determination to save what remained of humanity. They move tonight, Paul said. If they succeed, we'll have direct access to Kralaxian systems. Imagine what we could learn. In his cell, The Kralaxian prisoner Zextoral had undergone a change over the months of captivity. At first hostile and silent, he had gradually begun to speak more openly with his human captors. Whether from genuine change of heart or strategic calculation, he had started providing valuable information. "Your attack plan has flaws," he told Alan during their final meeting before the raid. "The flagship's secondary systems have redundancies. Your disruptors may not affect." Alan studied the alien carefully. Zextoral was smaller than most Kralaxians they had encountered, his blue-gray skin paler from months without their home atmosphere. "What would you suggest?" Alan asked, not entirely trusting but willing to listen. "Target the environmental controls first," Zextoral said. "Our species requires specific atmospheric conditions. Disrupt those, and the crew will be distracted and weakened." Alan made a mental note of this advice. "Why are you helping us? Your people would execute you for treason." The alien was quiet for a moment. "I have had time to observe humans. Your adaptability is remarkable. The Empire sees only resources to exploit, but I see something worth preserving." As night fell, Alan led a team of 20 fighters toward New Denver. They traveled in vehicles disguised as Kralaxian transports, captured in previous raids. Lisa's intelligence had identified a maintenance access point that would allow them to enter the flagship while it was docked for resupply. Jack Sullivan was waiting at the rendezvous point, a ruined building near the city's edge. "Everything's in place," he reported. "Our people inside the processing center will create a distraction at exactly 2300 hours. Alan checked his watch. "That gives us 30 minutes to get into position." The plan worked perfectly at first. The distraction, a small explosion at the processing center, drew Kralaxian security away from the maintenance docks. Alan's team, wearing stolen alien environmental suits, entered the massive ship through a service hatch. "Remember," Alan told his team over their secure comms, "our primary objective is the command center. Secondary objective is capturing a live officer. If either becomes impossible, we plant the charges and retreat." The charges were compact explosives designed to work with the disruptors, potentially crippling the flagship even if they couldn't capture it. Following Zextoral's advice, they targeted the environmental systems first. Kate's disruptors shut down the controls, causing atmosphere regulation to fail in several sections of the ship. Alarms blared as Alan led the team deeper into the vessel. The fighting was intense. Despite their advantage of surprise and the disruption of ship systems, the humans faced fierce resistance. Kralaxian warriors were formidable even without their advanced weapons, standing nearly 7 feet tall with 4 powerful arms. "Control room ahead," reported one of Alan's fighters, checking a stolen ship schematic. "Heavy security." Alan readied, his weapon, a hybrid of human and alien technology. "On my mark, now." They burst into the command center, disruptors firing. The Kralaxian officers were caught off guard, their weapons failing as the quantum field washed over them. In minutes, the humans had secured the room. "Hold positions," Alan ordered. "Mason, Ryan, get on those terminals. Download everything you can." As his team worked to extract data from the alien computers, Alan approached what appeared to be the main command station. A Kralaxian officer remained there, seemingly calm, despite the human weapons trained on him. "You must be the one called." "Frost," the alien said in surprisingly good English. "I am Sub-Commander Krelvor. I've studied your resistance tactics." Alan kept his weapon steady. "Then you know we're winning this war." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. This is not winning. This is merely delay." Before Alan could respond, the ship rocked with an explosion. One of his team shouted over the comm, "Colonel, we've got company. They're cutting through from the lower deck." "Time to go," Alan decided. "Do we have the data?" "Most of it, sir," replied Mason, removing a storage device from the alien terminal. "Including what looks like tactical plans." Alan turned back to Krelvor. "You're coming with us." The sub-commander didn't resist as they secured him. Whether from confidence or resignation, the alien allowed himself to be led from the command center as fighting erupted throughout the ship. The extraction was chaotic. 2 of Alan's team were killed covering the retreat. But they achieved both objectives, the data and a high-ranking prisoner. As they fled in their stolen vehicles, the charges they had planted detonated, crippling the flagship's main systems. Back at the mountain base, the data they had stolen proved invaluable. Lisa and her team worked tirelessly to decrypt and analyze. It's worse than we thought, she reported to the gathered resistance leaders. The reinforcement fleet is massive, over 300 ships, and they'll be here within 2 months. The room fell silent. Despite all their victories, humanity couldn't face such a force. There's more, Lisa continued. I've found communications suggesting why Earth is so important to them. Their homeworld is dying, some kind of self-inflicted ecological disaster. They need Earth's biodiversity to save their species. Kate and Paul exchanged looks. That matches what we've learned from studying their biology, Paul said. Their genetic diversity is extremely limited. They're suffering from the accumulated effects of cloning and genetic engineering gone wrong. In his secure cell, Krelvor watched the humans with calculating eyes. Unlike Zexitoral, he showed no signs of sympathizing with his captors. But he did confirm what they had learned. The Empire has expanded across hundreds of systems, he told Alan during interrogation, but we have not found another world like Earth. Your planet has more genetic diversity in one forest than exists in our entire civilization. So you decided to take it by force, Alan said, disgust evident in his voice. The Empire takes what it needs, Krelvor replied simply. It is how we have survived for 10,000 years. While the interrogation continued, Kate and Paul made a breakthrough with their research. They had been studying Kralaxian biology using samples obtained from fallen warriors. What they discovered was surprising. Their cellular structure can't handle Earth's environment long-term, Kate explained to Alan and the others. That's why they wear those suits all the time. Our atmosphere, our bacteria, even our solar radiation. It's all toxic to them over time. Can we use that? Alan asked. 5 years had passed since the day the quantum field trapped the Kralaxian fleet above Earth. 5 years of difficult negotiations, setbacks, and small steps forward. 5 years of learning to live alongside the very beings who had once tried to conquer humanity. The city that had once been New Denver was now something new, a place where both species worked and lived. Buildings of human and Kralaxian design stood side by side. The former battlefield had become a symbol of what was possible. Alan Frost walked through the central plaza, nodding to humans and Kralaxians alike. At 52, his hair had more gray than brown, but he moved with the same purpose that had guided him through the war. He no longer commanded fighters, but instead led the joint security force that maintained peace between the species. "Morning, Colonel," called a shopkeeper as Alan passed. Though he had officially retired from the military, people still used his rank. Some habits died hard. Alan waved in response and continued toward the large building at the plaza's center, the Cooperation Summit Hall, where representatives from both species met to address ongoing issues. Today's meeting was particularly important. Inside, he found Lisa Daniels waiting for him. She had traded intelligence work for diplomacy, becoming one of Earth's chief negotiators. "They're already inside," she told him, gesturing toward the main chamber doors. "The High Command sent their top science minister." "Good sign," Alan replied. "They're taking this seriously." They entered the chamber together. Around a circular table sat humans and Kralaxians, former enemies now working through the complex process of coexistence. President Wright was there, now in her second term, leading the post-war government. Across from her sat High Minister Relvax, who had replaced the more hardline Zalvex 2 years earlier. At the center of the table was a holographic display showing a planet, not Earth, but a world orbiting a distant star. "As you can see," Kate Monroe was saying as Alan and Lisa took their seats, "the terraforming progress has exceeded our projections. The atmosphere is now stable enough to begin the next phase." Kate had changed perhaps the most of all of them. Working with Kralaxian scientists, she had pioneered the technologies that might save both species. Her quantum field generator, once a weapon, had been adapted to create controlled environments where fragile ecosystems could be established. Beside her, Paul Evans highlighted areas on the hologram. The southern continent is showing particularly strong results. The introduced Earth species are adapting well and the soil chemistry is approaching optimal levels. The planet they were discussing was the first of several being transformed using Earth's ecological principles. New worlds where humans and Kralaxians could begin again, free from the damage both species had done to their original homes. The genetic treatments are also progressing well, added a Kralaxian scientist, his translated voice filling the room. The test population is showing a 60% reduction in degradation markers. This was perhaps the most important project of all, using Earth's genetic diversity to heal the Kralaxian species. It had taken 2 years just to convince the more conservative elements of their society to accept such help, seen by some as pollution of their genetic purity. But the results were undeniable. The treatments derived from human and Earth animal genetics were reversing the damage of millennia. And the transport fleet? Asked High Minister Relvax. On schedule, replied Jack Sullivan. After organizing the resistance supply network, he had naturally transitioned to managing the massive logistical challenge of interstellar colonization. The first 10,000 colonists can depart within 3 months. Alan watched the proceedings with a sense of wonder. If someone had told him 5 years ago that he would be sitting in a room with the aliens who destroyed his city, planning joint colonies, he would have called them insane. Yet here they were. Not that the path had been easy. The first year after the ceasefire had been filled with tension and near disasters. Hardliners on both sides had attempted to sabotage the peace. There had been violence, betrayals, and moments when it all seemed ready to collapse back into war. But each crisis had been overcome. Each setback followed by progress. Small steps that eventually covered great distances. After the meeting, Alan found Zexatoral waiting outside. The Kralaxian who had once been their prisoner was now a respected diplomat, working to bridge the gap between the species. Colonel Frost, he greeted, using the Kralaxian gesture of respect. The meeting went well? Better than expected, Alan replied. The colony project is ahead of schedule. They walked together through the plaza, an unusual pair that no longer attracted stares. I am to return to the homeworld next month, Zexatoral said, to report on the progress here and help prepare the next group of immigrants. The Kralaxian homeworld was dying. That much had been true. But unlike Earth, which they had sought to conquer, it could not be saved. Too much damage had been done over too many centuries. The only solution was evacuation and a new beginning. Will you visit the memorial while you're there? Alan asked. Zexatoral nodded solemnly. Of course, it is important to remember the cost of our mistakes. The memorial had been built in what remained of Cairo, the first city struck in the invasion. It bore the names of millions, humans killed in the war, and later, Kralaxians who had died when a radical human faction had released a bioweapon in retaliation. Tragedy had touched both sides. They parted ways at the plaza's edge, each with duties to attend to. Alan made his way to the research complex on the city's outskirts, where Kate maintained her primary laboratory. He found her in the main testing chamber, surrounded by equipment that merged human creativity with Kralaxian precision. Through the viewing windows, he could see environments simulating conditions on the colony worlds. Alan, she greeted with a tired smile. I didn't expect you today. Thought I'd check in after the summit, he replied. Lisa said the High Command approved. The expansion? Kate nodded, brushing a strand of gray-streaked hair from her face. 3 more worlds added to the project. If they all succeed, we'll have homes for billions from both species. Alan looked through the window at a testing chamber where Earth plants grew in soil designed to mimic the colony world. Did you ever imagine this, when you were building that field generator to stop their fleet? Never, Kate admitted. I was just trying to save what was left of humanity. Now we're saving both species. Their conversation was interrupted when Paul entered, followed by a young Kralaxian assistant. The new samples are ready, he announced. The genetic compatibility is even better than we hoped. Kate turned to Alan with an apologetic smile. Duty calls. Dinner later? Jack and Lisa are coming too. I'll be there, Alan promised, leaving them to their work. Outside the complex, he paused to look up at the sky. A Kralaxian ship was visible, descending toward the spaceport. Once, such a sight would have meant terror. Now it was simply routine. Transport ships coming and going, carrying supplies and personnel for the joint projects. His wristcom buzzed with a message from President Wright. The final approval had come through for the most ambitious project yet, the ship that would carry the first mixed crew of humans and Kralaxians to the stars. And Wright wanted Alan to lead the security team. As he read the details, he couldn't help but smile at the ship's name. Second Chance. That evening, Alan joined his friends for dinner at Jack's home overlooking the city. Jack Sullivan had done well in the post-war economy, his network of contacts making him invaluable in rebuilding efforts. His house reflected this success, spacious and well-appointed, with a view that showcased the new city rising from the ruins of the old. To the colony project, Jack proposed, raising his glass as they sat around the dinner table. May it succeed beyond our wildest hopes. They all drank to that. The conversation flowed easily among old friends who had been through the worst together and now worked towards something better. I heard about your new assignment, Lisa said to Alan. The Second Chance, quite the honor. I haven't accepted yet, Alan replied. It's a 5-year mission, a long time to be away from Earth. Earth will still be here, Kate pointed out. And think of what you'll see. New worlds, new possibilities. Besides, Jack added with a grin, if anyone can keep a mixed crew of humans and Kralaxians from killing each other on a long voyage, it's you. They laughed. But there was truth in his words. Despite 5 years of progress, tensions remained. Old wounds healed slowly. The journey would not be easy. Later, as they moved to the balcony with their drinks, the conversation turned more reflective. Sometimes, I can hardly believe how far we've come, Lisa said, looking out over the city where humans and aliens now lived side by side. When they first attacked, I thought that was the end. It almost was, Jack replied soberly. For both species, as it turns out, Kate nodded. The Kralaxians were on the brink of extinction. Their conquered worlds couldn't save them. They needed Earth's biodiversity, our genetic adaptability. And we needed their technology, added Alan. Their knowledge of other worlds. Together, we're accomplishing in years what might have taken centuries alone. If they had just asked for help in the first place, Lisa mused. Instead of attacking, Alan shook his head. The Empire didn't know how to ask, only how to take. That was their fatal flaw.